We're gonna have some interruptions today because we've got the cat, and when I talk and the cat's not involved, she wants to be involved. So, yeah, it is a rainy day here in Southern California, and we are just coming off of a weekend during which I did zero riding. I had a couple of reasons for that. One was my foot has still, this is the cat, in case you're watching the video. This is Tiki. Her name is Kitty rearranged. She didn't have a name for a long time. We couldn't really think of a name for this thing. We just called her Kitty or Cat. And then eventually we gave her a name because she was coming across our wooden floors or laminate floors or whatever. And her claws were making a little tiki tiki noise. And I started saying that, tiki tiki tiki. And then I was like, oh, that's her name because it's like Kitty, but rearranged. I'm so clever. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, so one of the reasons why I didn't ride was my foot has been hurting a fair bit. Not terrible, but when I'm on it a lot, it's been hurting. But I wanted to give it a break. But also, I guess there's three reasons. Also, the last few times that I've gone riding, I've crashed. I don't think I've had a ride in weeks during which I didn't crash. And I've figured I've just been like just been throwing the dice a little too much. So take a break before something terrible happens. I know it doesn't prevent an actual injury, but yeah. The third reason why I didn't ride was because of getting the camper set up, which if you follow me on Instagram, you probably saw the stories where we're building out the interior of the camper. And hopefully you saw the way I had that set up, and I explained it already before, but it's cool that we actually did it. The thing that stokes me out the most about it is that we were able to do it really simply. The way we attached, we were able to do it really simply, minimally, but also in such a way that it's really easy to take apart. Jeff's a buddy. He's the retail manager or something like that at the Path Bike Shop, my local bike shop, the bike shop that supports me. But he's just generally a really good guy. And he and I connected up. He came over here because he's built stuff. He has a van life van, lives out of his van. And so he knows how to build drawers and cabinets and stuff. So he came over and I had a general plan, which you already saw, but then we really got down to the nitty gritty and really figured out how we wanted the design to work, what wood we needed to buy, how we were going to put it together. Because unlike the guys, the design that I was inspired by, unlike that, I really needed to be easy to take out and store in my garage. So the smaller the pieces once it's out of the truck, the better. So yeah, the design we ended up with, I still think ended up being probably more built than it needs to be. Once we started looking at the actual size of the truck bed, I started realizing we probably don't need as much support under the platform as I thought we did. The distances aren't that big, and we got 3/4 inch plywood which is pretty dang thick. So yeah. If you saw the pictures on Instagram, you might have seen, why don't I just show you? You can actually see we were this was our we were you probably can't see that, but we were just drawing all kinds of stuff. But what we ended up with was, where's that pencil? Anyway, so I don't know if you can see this, but there is a main stringer kind of here. This is like the main stringer, 2x10. And then we have a back piece. This is the truck cab is that way. That's the cab. And then the tailgate is here. Cool. Tailgate's there. So ignore this, that's not there. So there's a main stringer, and then we have a back piece that's up against the cab, and then we have two supporting pieces that are there. And it's actually like that. These are on the outside. So originally, like, I thought we were gonna have to like drill stuff and do a bunch of glue and stuff. And then we'd end up with this like piece that was kind of all together. Once we got to Home Depot though, we found like some of those big like metal pieces that you use to attach, like, you know, when you're doing framing and you've got your studs and stuff like that, you've got the metal pieces that you use to attach that. I saw those and I was like, oh, we could probably use that. So for the T, we just attached one here, and we just attached it to the backboard. So this stringer here, it's not drilled into anything. We just shove it into that, and then it actually lines up perfectly with one of the channels in my truck bed, so it just sits right in there. I mean, like, it would pull out if you really pulled on it, but you know, the tailgate's going to be closed, which holds it in. And then we just used L brackets, big thick L brackets for these to attach them. We did put a couple of screws in this way, like that way, just to kind of add a little bit more. But that was it for the frame, like super simple. And honestly, we probably could have gotten rid of these two side pieces and just cut this back piece a little bit longer, because right here, guess what's right here? These are our wheel wells. So like this could have just shoved into the wheel wells, because on the edge of the bed is a little edge that's meant to be able to put a platform on. So yeah, and the platform, we made it so that like one thing, like there's a little pillar back here in the back corner of the tailgate. So we just scalloped it. I can't remember the term we used, but we basically scalloped it around that, the platform. So between here, it being here, and then kind of up against the edges up here, that piece stays by itself. So we have one piece that goes like that, and then we have the other piece that goes like that. Like that's that angle thing we were talking about. So now we have two pieces. These come out, make it really easy to take them out and store. And then the whole thing is really simple. The thing that I'm really liking about it is because it's easy for me to take the platform out, or even just one side of the platform out, and the frame is minimal. For the most part, I really only ever need to take one platform out, this one, because it actually, without this platform, this doesn't like stay by itself. So take this one out, and then I can still use my tailgate pad. I can still use my tailgate pad because the bike just goes in there. So yeah, that was kind of one of my main concerns, is like, oh, like when I'm not camping, I'm gonna have to store this whole thing somewhere. But from what I can tell, I should be able to just keep the majority of the camping setup in the truck all the time. And if I need to carry two bikes, I just pull the other side of the platform out, and then there's just a stringer that's there, and the bike, the rears of the bike will go in there just fine. And then maybe on occasion, I'll need to pull the whole thing out. The other thing I need to do is paint the frame with some, like, you know, weatherproof, water resistant house paint. Because if it's going to live in the back of the truck, it probably won't get wet most of the time, because I have the camper, the soft topper on there. So it'll mostly be protected from the elements. But yeah, anyway, I didn't want to talk too long about that. But I am pretty stoked on it. So yeah, camping happening soon. This coming weekend, we're going to be putting the carpet on the platform and then maybe doing a little bit additional building on it. I don't want to go too far with it, but we were talking about things with the power station that I'm going to have, if we're going to do anything for that, and maybe a little access panel on one of the sides of the platform. We'll see. But yeah, not riding this weekend, though. I don't feel quite right. I don't. You might relate to this, and it got me thinking about how when I don't ride, what it's like. How like it. I was always thinking like when I don't ride, I feel like I don't feel like myself because part of my self-worth comes from what I can accomplish on the bike, you know? Like, can I do a gnarly thing or learn a new feature or whatever? But I heard something recently that made me realize that there's maybe something more deep and possible and more deep and also less bad. That's not the word I'm looking for, but not as critical of myself. Anyway, somebody was talking about moving in a way that makes you feel good in your body. I was actually listening to a podcast about kind of had to do with diet culture, weight loss, all those kind of things. And I've talked in the past about how I don't believe weight loss is a good approach and that we should be working on being fit and moving well. And so I don't want to go totally into that podcast, but it's on the 10% Happier podcast. I think it was this maybe the last episode or the episode before, something about not obsessing over your weight. I'll look it up while I talk. But one of the things they talked about was how to stop obsessing over your body and eat sanely in a toxic culture. Virginia Soul Smith was the guest. The host is Dan Harris. Really good podcast if you don't listen to it. Anyway, the guest was talking about doing activities that make you feel good in your body. And that really struck home for me. That's really what's going on for me on the mountain bike. So when I'm riding it and I just don't feel like I'm handling the bike well, it can be frustrating and I feel disconnected. And the tension there for me is to get connected and feel like I'm in my body and enjoy being in my body. So doing a straight jump doesn't feel as good as doing a whip. Even if it's not that big of a whip, it still feels better in my body. Carving turns and doing rock gardens and jumping over features, it just feels good in my body. Like I can feel it in my joints and the corners and the angles of my body. I can feel the goodness. Sure, you can relate as a fellow mountain biker, but it made it so that it gave me perspective on that feeling like I didn't get fed if I didn't go for a ride. Maybe you're fortunate enough to ride just whenever during the week, but I'm pretty much strapped in to weekend riding. So when I get a ride in on the weekend, it really helps me out throughout the rest of the week because I've done those things. I've moved my body. Yeah. One of the things I always liked about skateboarding too was there was this creative aspect to it, an expressive aspect to it too. And while that doesn't necessarily come across in my mountain biking, I don't think, I do feel it internally. I do aspire to be able to show some of that when I'm riding. And I have seen some footage of myself getting, where that expression is coming out and I actually look like I feel on the bike. And that's kind of cool. there was an internal critic saying like, you shouldn't care what you look like. It's really about what you feel like. At the same time, having that external perspective and seeing how my body is moving gives me more of a baseline. So if I think I'm like getting a big old whip out there, but I'm just kind of moving the back wheel a little bit, it lets me know I can go a lot further and get even more movement. And so that's kind of how I'm starting to take that. Yes, I do want to look cool in front of people. I'm on camera right now talking. I film myself and post it on YouTube. So that is part of my personality. But when it comes to riding, I do aspire to get the bike sideways. Yeah. Anyway, I'm continuing on with the War of Art. That's this book. I'm 3/4 of the way through. I'm just starting book 3, which is Beyond Resistance. I just finished Going Pro. I think that's what book 2 is. I want to recommend the book, but we're not there yet because I haven't finished the book, and I don't like to recommend books that I have yet to finish. But because I'm not driving, I thought I would show you some of the little drawings that I do. So let me find a good one for you. Da-da-da. It's mostly like notes. So a lot of notes in the margins. This is one that's really dumb. I'm going to show you this one because it's so goofy and not well drawn. But I don't know if you can see there. There's like 2 watches. There's me with the long hair and the mustache, and then on the other side is a light bulb. And there was something that he says, which is, so anyways, motion is infallible. I write only when inspiration strikes. Fortunately, it strikes every morning at 9 o'clock sharp. This is when the author is asking, the author, who is Stephen Pressfield, is asking a writer, Somerset Maugham, about inspiration. And where did that come from? Mundane act of skill, sitting down, starting work. He set in motion, mission, produce inspiration. Okay, here it is. By performing the mundane physical act of sitting down and starting to work, he set in motion a mysterious but infallible sequence of events that would produce inspiration, as surely as if the goddess had synchronized her watch with his. So I drew 2 watches, me, and the idea, the bulb, to imply inspiration, the goddess of inspiration. I know it's not a very good illustration, but I'm synchronized as watches, and I can look at that illustration and I immediately know what that means. Here, let me find you one more. One thing I will say as I'm looking for the fun illustration that I drew is there's a lot of things in here. I'm totally out of focus now because I've been moving it. There's a lot of things in here that have already been a part of my mentality. He talks about craft. He talks about doing the work. He talks about how, like, you know, it's not trying to like get crazy and have this big, massive experience and talks about just doing the work, and it doesn't have to be like a mass amount of work all at once. It could be a little bit at a time. And you know, I've preached that for a while about like you do what you can today, and you do a little bit at a time. Here's a fun little illustration. where he was talking about there's a difference between, understanding the concept of being a warrior and actually being the warrior. So it's a book with a sword in it, but then the actual sword there next to it. It's one thing to study war and another to live the warrior's life. So yeah, to me, a lot of that is just doing it, doing the work little by little, doing what I can today. So, I'm working on this Santa Barbara video, and there's a lot of video to edit, and I've been cutting it down, but instead of trying to sit down for 12, 15 hours and just kind of bang it all out all at once, I've been like doing as much of it as I can when I can, and just kind of keeping the momentum going without like just fully just going off the brakes and off the cliff. I'm in a Slack group with other content creators, and there's often talk about burnout, and there's talk about like, hating editing or all the things about it that a person will hate, or how they, have a hard time motivating themselves to do the work. And I understand that, because I know that when I go in to edit, oftentimes when I go in to edit or work on anything, write a script or outline something, I know how I can be. I can just like dive into it and be into it for like a really long time and kind of like disappear into it, which can be kind of cool, but it does take a lot out of me. And so when I'm just chilling and I'm thinking like, do I want to sit on the couch and watch Netflix, or do I want to go into battle? It's more likely that I'm going to want to sit on the couch, right? It's more comfortable. But if it's not about necessarily always going into battle, but sometimes it's just about sitting down for an hour and sharpening the sword, or sitting down or just doing something for 15 minutes or 2 hours. One thing that I like to do when I have a bunch of footage is I'd like to go through all that footage, logging the footage. And each file, I'll watch the file, and if it seems like something is in there, I'll make notes. I just actually rename the file so everything's all together. And that really kind of helps me get a picture of if there's a story there in that content. It might be a full episode story that I can pull out. It might be a single moment. But sitting down and logging those files, even if there's a buttload of files, it doesn't take that long. It takes maybe like, for like a day of riding, I can usually get through a set of files in an hour. If it's a big day, a couple of hours. But that's like somewhat mindless work. It doesn't require a whole bunch of like creativity. It's just watching stuff and taking notes. But that really helps me prepare for being inspired. It helps me prepare for creating the episode. Makes it easier for me to find stuff when I'm in the midst of editing. It's just a little bit of organization. And I like that. Like just recently I posted a video of me almost clipping my pedal on a rock on one of these DH tracks nearby here. And I had like known that had happened on that day, but it's been a couple of weeks. I kind of forgot about it. So as I'm logging the footage, I'm like, oh, that was a interesting moment. And I just made a really quick Instagram reel for that and have gotten a reasonable amount of response and reaction to that. And that's pretty cool. And that's one of those like little things that just kind of jumped out as a result of doing the work, doing the mundane tasks, and not expecting it to be this big epic thing every time. Anyway, I haven't finished the book, but I will continue on. I'm still in focus. Well, that's it. Are we like past 20 minutes? Oh my God, this has gone long. All right, this happens every time I'm in the office. It's raining outside. I didn't want to go out, and I had a bunch of meetings today, so you got Alphas, Alan. Thanks again for your support. I'll see you on the next one.